Okay. Today we are going to discuss about mucormycosis. Whatever I am going to talk is based upon ECMM guidelines, that is a European Confederation of Medical Mycology. They framed a guidelines, that is a one world, one guidelines for the invasive fungal infections, especially mucormycosis. ECMM in association with MSG ERC, that is a mycosis study group. Education and research consortium. So they framed a guidelines for mucormycosis. That is a one word and one guidelines. Why mucormycosis is so important? Because we have 4 reasons for that. First one, it's very rapidly progressive. Because of 2 characters, it has a angio invasion. So easily it enters the blood and causes hematogenous spread, resulting in disseminated mucormycosis, and also it will cause local tissue destruction and necrosis. So locally also it will spread easily because of destroying the bones and local tissues. So next reason will be non-availability of the rapid biomarker test to diagnose these conditions. That is a user-friendly rapid biomarker test is not available for most of the fungal infections, including this one. So difficulty in diagnosis, and also wide range of variability in case of presentation, clinical presentation, based upon our immune system and also the route of exposure. Based on these, the clinical spectrum varies from ocular manifestation to pulmonary, cerebral, even GI manifestation. So when to suspect mucormycosis is also difficult. And the last one, important one is early treatment is very, very important to prevent the mortality. The mortality rate in mucormycosis is about 40 to 80%. However, if you intervene earlier, you can decrease the mortality. Actually, one of the prognostic predictor of mucormycosis is delay in starting amphotericin B. So 3 reasons will be rapid progression, non-availability of the diagnostic test, and also varying clinical manifestation, and also early treatment is very, very important. So because of these 4 things, it has a field of interest. So what is mucormycosis? Previously, it is called as zygomycosis. It is caused by a fungi belongs to phylum of Mucormycota and to order Mucorales and also to group Mucormycetes. So inside this there are many genus, and inside the genus there are many species. So the most common genus will be Rhizosphagus. It is caused by a fungi belongs to phylum of Mucormycota and to order Mucorales and also to group Mucormycetes. So inside this there are many genus, and inside the genus there are many species. So the most common genus will be Rhizosphagus. So the most common genus will be under Mucor will be Rhizopus. The second most common will be Mucor. Third most common will be Lycthymia. Previously it is named as Absidia. And other things, rare involvement like Rhizomucor, Cunningham, and then Apophysomycosis. It has isolated renal mucormycosis. It has a property to involve renal isolated. Only renal involvement will be there in case of apophysomasis. Another species like Saxinesa. So most common will be Rhizopus, next will be Mucor, and third will be Absidia. Inside those genus, there are many species are there. So what is the source for these fungus? This fungus in the environment in the form of spores. As we know, the spores is the resistant forms. That is a sporangiospores. These sporangiospores are the infective material. It will enter into our body via through three routes. It can be inhalation, ingestion, or through direct contact. Direct contact with the abraded or injured skin, not with the healthy skin, even in immunocompetent individuals. So the sources of fungus will be, that is the sources of spores will be decayed vegetable matters, dried leaves, soils and manures, and also our humidifier, unsterile water. Humidifier filled with unsterile water will also be the source. So they will enter into our body via these three routes: inhalation or ingestion and direct contact. Once entered, these fungi will transform into hyphae. This spore form in the environment is very resistant, whereas this hyphae form in our body is very fragile. So if you are taking biopsy of the tissues affected by these fungus and you put it under direct microscopy or under the culture, while inoculation itself, most of the hyphae will damaged. So damaged hyphae can't produce the growth in the culture, so resulting in false negative. So that's why there is a difficulty in diagnosing mucormycosis, especially in culture. So who are all under risk for mucormycosis? Uncontrolled diabetes, then solid organ transplantation. Those patients will be on chemo and other immunosuppressions, and also HIV, and also hematological malignancies. Usually they will be having neutropenia, right? So because of neutropenia, they are more prone for mucormycosis, and also COD9 deficiency, that is immunodeficiency condition, and also chronic granulomatous conditions, and neutropenia of other causes, and our recent headache, COVID-19, and injudicious use of steroids. So these people are more prone for developing mucormycosis. Not only the immunocompromised, but also the immunocompetent are also at risk to develop mucormycosis if there is direct inoculation, that is direct contact with injured skin because of burn, trauma, or insect bite. So it will cause local skin swelling, tissue necrosis, resulting in abscess, and then eschar. Mucormycosis outbreak is also common after natural disasters because of injury. Previously, we have evidenced mucormycosis outbreak after Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, and also Joplin tornado in 2011. During these three natural disasters also, they have evidenced mucormycosis outbreak. Other risk factors for mucormycosis will be our hospital acquired because of catheter, adhesives, and our tongue depressor and our humidifier containing unsterile water. And also the risk is present in persons who is having habit of IV drug abuse. IV drug abuse patients are more prone for isolated renal mucormycosis. Despite all these things, even immunocompetent patients also having a risk of developing mucormycosis because of some unknown reason. Not that much common, but it is possible. So recently recovered post COVID-19 patients and also the patient who is on steroid, advise them to wear mask while handling those decayed vegetables and soils, dried leaves and manures. So as I already said, it has two properties, local tissue destruction and also angio invasion. So based on the route of entry, if it is entering via the nose, it can cause sinusitis, it can cause a orbital edema or orbital cellulitis with the proptosis, lid edema and ptosis, amaurosis, that is a loss of vision, painful blindness. And also, it will affect the extraocular muscles, resulting in restricted extraocular movements. And also, it can affect the brain, resulting in altered mental status, vomiting, seizures, features of raised intracranial pressure because of cavernous sinus thrombosis. And also, it has a risk of orbital apex syndrome. So, three emergencies will be cavernous sinus thrombosis, orbital apex syndrome, and amaurosis fugax. And also, it can involve palate. So, there will be crust or black ulcers over the palate. And also, it can enter the lung, involve the pulmonary. In the lung, it will cause respiratory symptoms like persistent cough, fever, and breathlessness, hemoptysis. So based on this clinical spectrum, mucormycosis can be cutaneous and soft tissue mucormycosis. Because of local inoculation, it will cause a skin edema, swelling, abscess, and eschar. And it can cause rhino-oculocerebral mucormycosis. And also it can cause pulmonary mucormycosis. It can cause gastrointestinal mucormycosis, especially if the route of entry is via the mouth, not by inhalation but by ingestion. If it is via ingestion, can enter the GI tract and causes isolated gastrointestinal mucormycosis. Patient will present with fever, abdominal distension, and GI bleeding because of risk of perforation. Wherever it goes, it will cause local tissue destruction. So it can easily cause GI perforation and resulting in bleeding. And next one will be renal mucormycosis. As I already told, IV drug abusers are more prone for these disease. Isolated renal mucormycosis. The organism causing renal mucormycosis will be Apophysomyces elegans. This renal mucormycosis patient will present with fever, flank pain, and hematuria. And next will be bones and joints. Mainly because of two reasons: because of trauma or because of hematogenous spread, that is disseminated mucormycosis. Bones and joints will be involved. Orbit will be already involved because of sinusitis. Extracranial bones will be involved because of trauma and hematogenous spread. And last will be disseminated because of blood spread, disseminated mucormycosis. So clinical spectrum ranges from cutaneous and soft tissue infection, rhino-oculocerebral infection, pulmonary infection, gastrointestinal, renal, even bones and joints, and disseminated. So based upon our clinical symptoms, so diagnosis will proceed with imaging. As I already told, there is no rapid test available to diagnose these conditions. So we rely highly upon imaging. Based upon the symptoms, we have to choose the area of interest. For example, if the patient present with pulmonary symptoms, take CT chest. Patient present with orbital cellulitis and sinusitis feature, take CT cranium with PNS. If the patient presents with abdominal symptoms, take USG or CT abdomen in case of isolated renal mucormycosis. In case of CT chest, we will be having reverse halo sign. That is, GGOs will be present, followed by there will be area of consolidation. And also there will be pleural effusion, more than 10 discrete nodules. And also because of features of angio invasion, on doing CTPA, we can find some of the thrombus in the pulmonary circulation. So if the CT chest is showing reverse halo sign or pleural effusion or more than 10 nodules or thrombus, then it's more towards mucormycosis in the setting of mucormycosis. Not in all cases. Many cases can cause 10 to 10 discrete nodules. But under the setting of fungal infection, if you are suspecting mucormycosis or aspergillus, you are finding these things in your CT, then the diagnosis is against aspergillosis. That is what I am coming to say is, in the setting of fungal infection, for example, post-COVID patient or patient under immunosuppression developing pulmonary symptoms long-standing, you are suspecting fungal infection, you want to differentiate between invasive aspergillosis and mucormycosis, these findings will help. And moving on to CT, orbit, and PNS. So the most common finding will be sinusitis. It will be difficult to differentiate it from bacterial sinusitis. So both fungal and bacterial sinusitis will look similar. Most common finding will be mucosal edema or thickening associated with opacification of sinuses. In later cases, there will be bony erosion. So bacterial sinusitis usually won't cause erosion. If you are having sinusitis, then you have to proceed with MRI, brain and orbit. There will be extraocular muscle edema or inflammation. There can be a possibility of cavernous venous thrombosis or orbital apex syndrome. So next thing will be CT abdomen or USG abdomen in case of fever with abdominal distension with hematuria, flank pain. In case of renal mucormycosis, CT abdomen will be showing enlarged kidneys, which is non-hydronephrotic. There is no hydronephrosis. There will be some hypodensities. These are called cortical rim sign. So we will be doing imaging for three reasons. First one, to suspect or diagnose mucormycosis. Next one, to know the extent of disease. MRI to know the extent of disease. Based on that, we are going to manage the patient. Third thing will be after treatment. We have to do regular imaging for follow-up and the response to treatment. So after imaging, the CT chest is suggestive of mucormycosis, or the CT brain and CT orbit or MRI brain suggestive of mucormycosis. Then you have to proceed with two things. One will be serology and the next will be biopsy. Biopsy can be endoscopy based. If it is accessible, you can go with CT guided biopsy also. Endoscopy will be based upon the area of interest, can be FIS, can be bronchoscopy, can be OGD. Based upon the symptoms and the lesion, you have to choose one of these. Or if it is accessible, you can take CT guided needle biopsy and look it under direct microscopy. So under direct microscopy, using immuno brightness like calflower white stain, you are going to see hyphae. As I already told, in our body there will be only hyphae. In the environment there will be spores. As I already mentioned, these hyphae are very friable, so they will be easily damaged, resulting in culture negative in most of the cases. Almost half of the patients will be culture negative. So after taking the biopsy, look under direct microscopy with the calflower white immunobrightness along with KOH. KOH is proteolysis, so it will remove all those tissues, making us to view the hyphae. These hyphae will be looking like aseptate, broad. Usually other fungus will be around 6 or 3 to 5 micrometer. It will be ranging from 6 to 16, even up to 25 micrometer. So it will be very broad and also aseptate. There will be no septate, and there will be dichotomous branching. That is obtuse angle to right angle branching. 90 to 110 degree branching will be there. So based on three findings, we will diagnose it as mucormycosis, not as aspergillosis or other invasive candidiasis. Other stains used will be periodic acid skip and Gomeris methanamine silver stain. It also going to show the same things like aseptate hyphae, broad and dichotomous branching hyphae. These hyphae with the tissues, this biopsy which we have taken, having hyphae is inoculated into the culture media. So if you do carefully, the culture will grow. Usually in Sambrots, dextrose agar. This will be the agar. The growth will be first, it will be vegetative. And then it will also have aerosol growth that is in there. So giving cotton candy appearance, looking like a cotton. Once it grows enough, it will lift the lid. So hence it is called as lid lifters. It will looks like gray to black. Rhizopus will be looking like salt and pepper appearance, will be having black and white appearance. So in the culture, the fungus will form hyphae and also spores. So again, if you take this culture and put it under direct microscope and look into, you will be able to find hyphae, spores with sporangium and sporangiophore and also rhizides. Based upon these three things, we are able to differentiate the different genus under the mucormycosis. That is usually most common will be Rhizopus. Next will be Absidia. Next will be Mucor. So there will be hyphae, which will be aseptate, broad, and ribbon-shaped. Dichotomous or obtuse angle branching, which will be having sporangiospore, ends with a sporangium, which will be containing sporangiospore. And it will be having roots-like structure that is called a rhizoids. So based upon the presence of rhizoids, we are going to differentiate these species, so this genus. This point is called as nodal. So Rhizopus will be having nodal rhizoids, whereas Apsidia will be having internodal rhizoids. Whereas Mucor will be having no rhizoids. This is important because we have to choose the antibiotic dosage, antifungal dosage is based on these species. So first one will be direct microscopy, and then we have to inoculate into the culture, and then from the culture you have to take and put it under the microscope to know the genus. And other methods available will be molecular methods. Sorry, I forgot to say about serology. Once CT finding suggestive of mucormycosis, you have to do two things. Either endoscopy guided or CT guided biopsy, and look it under direct microscope, and then culture, and then again culture microscopy. And also side by side you have to do serology. That is usually for invasive fungal infections. We will be doing two things: 1,3 beta D glucan and also galactomannan. If these things are positive, then it is more in favor of aspergillosis and candidiasis. If these things are negative, it is more favor of mucormycosis. Because these mucormycosis fungus will produce very little amount of galactomannan and 1,3 beta D glucan. So it won't be detected by our routine investigations, routine assays, especially galactomannan. If it is negative, then it is considered as false negative in case of mucormycosis. If it is positive, then it is considered as aspergillosis, aspergilloma or mixed infection. It means it is considered as false positive. It is not because of mucormycosis. That's what I mean to say. And also there will be 1,3 beta D glucan. It is positive only in few cases of Rhizopus, but not in other species. So if the CT is showing the features of mucormycosis, and you have did endoscopy or CT guided biopsy, and you have look into direct microscopy and also culture, and also the serology shows negative galactomannan or 1,3 beta D glucan, then you can proceed with one more thing called immunofluorescence to identify the genus and species. Immunofluorescence, sorry, not the immunofluorescence, molecular methods. Immunofluorescence already said, that is with the immunofluorescent brightener like calfluor white, we are going to look the hyphae. So moving into molecular methods, we have two things. MALDI-TOF, that is a matrix assisted laser desorption ionization, time of flight. So MALDI-TOF will be detecting disaccharides in the serum. It will usually identify 9 out of 10 mucormycosis patients, but it's not specific for the genus. It has more sensitivity towards Rhizopus. Other available thing will be ITS sequencing. So 2 molecular methods available are MALDI-TOF and ITS sequencing. Other molecular methods like PCR amplification, gene targets like 18S. These are not commercially available. They are under trial. So this is the thing I want to show. The clinical presentation can be varies from proptosis, ptosis, lid edema. Here there is ptosis and also palatal ulcer, eschar. This is the typical case of rhinocerebral mucormycosis. Once you have seen those symptoms, based upon the symptoms, you have to choose the CT. It can be CT chest. Can be CT chest or it can be cranial CT if the patient has facial signs, sinusitis or proptosis. If it is trauma, based upon the site of trauma, you have to take CT. If you have renal symptoms, you have to take abdominal CT. At the end of CT, you have to take biopsies and you have to look it under direct microscopy, and also you have to culture those tissues, and also molecular methods available will be PCR and recent things will be MALDI-TOF. And serology will be galactomannan and 1,3-beta-glucan. If it is negative, then it is more towards mucormycosis. If it is positive, then it's against mucormycosis. That is, it's going towards aspergillosis and candidiasis. This one will be the reverse calocine, center GGOs followed by consolidation. So after diagnosing, moving into management. So management will be surgical more than medical. The surgery should be yearly, radical. We have to remove all the infected tissues, and also it should be a repeated surgery. That is, we should follow the patient for recurrence. So the surgery should be earlier and it should be radical and it should be a repeated surgery if there is recurrence of lesion. So you have to resect all the infected tissues, which can be checked up by intraoperative fluorescent brightener. Of resected tissues. So by seeing this, we can say whether this margin is infected or not. Until attaining clean margin, you have to continue, you have to resect. Especially in the phase to avoid the unnecessary removal, you have to do intraop fluorescent brightener. And also other approach will be MOHS, which is practiced in other cutaneous malignancies like malignant melanoma. To limit the tissue resection, we will be having this micrographically oriented histographic surgery. So these things also can be tried. So whatever tissue infected, we have to resect and you have to eviscerate. Either it can be starting from skin and soft tissue. It can be nose, the rhino orbital cerebral, and also it can be lung, it can be liver, it can be peritoneum, even it can be bone. Whatever it is, you have to resect. After resection, we have to start with medical therapy. So medical therapy to start with any type of mucormycosis, as I said, starting from cutaneous, to pulmonary renal, rhino-oculocerebral mucormycosis. In all those things, you have to go with amphotericin B. It is available in 3 forms. It can be liposomal, lipid complex, and then deoxycholate. If there is mucormycosis without CNS involvement, with CNS involvement, you have to go with liposomal amphotericin B. If it is unavailable, that is liposomal amphotericin B is unavailable and the patient is not having CNS symptoms, you can go with lipid complex. But deoxycholate amphotericin B is not at all recommended in any mucormycosis. So either you have to go with liposomal amphotericin B in any type of mucormycosis. If the patient is not having any CNS involvement and also you won't have amphotericin B, liposomal amphotericin B, then you can go with lipid complex amphotericin B. If both these drugs are not available, then you have to go with azoles, isavuconazole, and then posaconazole. These drugs needs therapeutic drug monitoring because these drugs are prone for toxicity. Even amphotericin B is renal toxic, which needs regular monitoring. These drugs have narrow therapeutic window, so you have to check for the therapeutic drug levels if possible. For isavuconazole, it will be around 4 microgram per ml. Sorry, 1 microgram per ml. For posaconazole, it will be 1 microgram per ml, 4 microgram per ml in case of mucor, 1 microgram per ml in case of rhizopus. So what is the dosage? Isavuconazole will be starting with 200 mg, 3 tablets, either in IV or oral on day 1 and 2, followed by 3 times TAD, followed by 200 mg OD. Whereas in case of posaconazole, you have to go with a 300 mg BD, that is 600 mg on the first day, same 600 here, that is 200 mg TAD on day 1 alone, here for day 1 and 2, followed by 300 mg OD for the remaining days. So in order of preference, first will be liposomal amphotericin B, lipid complex amphotericin B, next will be isavuconazole, next will be posaconazole. Isavuconazole will require minimal inhibitory concentration will be higher than the posaconazole in culture. However, the level achieved by isavuconazole in the blood is higher than the posaconazole. That is, the therapeutic level achieved in patients receiving isavuconazole is high compared to posaconazole in the same dose. Whereas in culture, posaconazole have upper hand than the isavuconazole. So how long you should take depends upon the patient. You have to regularly monitor with CT imaging. If there is good response, continue with the same first line drug, that is liposomal amphotericin B, or you can change to isavuconazole or posaconazole IV or oral. If there is a static course, even then you can continue with amphotericin B, or you can change to isavuconazole or posaconazole. If there is worsening of condition, then you have to change it to isavuconazole or posaconazole. And also, if there is any renal toxicity in these stages, you have to switch over to isavuconazole and posaconazole. So other supportive therapies will be iron. As we know, iron plays a major role in the fungus metabolism. If you are going to supply iron, or if you are going to give desferoxamine is iron chelator, it makes the iron free. So dexferoxamine will be acting as siderophore. Siderophore means it will carry the iron. iron carrier. So fungus will easily consume this iron and it will grow happily. So avoid iron and desferoxamine in patients with mucormycosis. However, recent trials saying that deferoxyrox, which is also a iron chelator, but it won't have the action of siderophore. So when combined with liposomal amphotericin B, it has better outcome. However, it is only the in vitro study. Since desferoxyrox will cause bone marrow depression, since most of the patients are neutropenic, we can't prescribe deferoxyrox. And also it is toxic to kidney. So because of these two reasons, it's not used widely. However, it will come into the guidelines in future because more trials are supporting this deferoxyrox with amphotericin B. Because most of our patients are not neutropenic, most of them are post immunosuppressive status. So they might bring this into the guideline. Granulocyte colony stimulating factors, which will boost up our immunity to fight the fungus. So it can be given as a supplement, which will be filgrastim, linograstim, lipeg-filgrastim. So you have to decrease the host vulnerability to the infection, which can be done with controlling your sugars. Since patients with DKA or ketoacidosis state, patient will be expressing GRP78, that is a glucose regulated protein 78. It will act as a channel or ligand for fungus. So it will easily bind to this and it will happily grow. The ligand in the fungus will be COAT-H, that is a spore coat protein homologue. So it is the ligand in the fungus. It will bind to glucose regulated protein 78. So the antibodies directed against these things have beneficial role, which is under trial. So antibody against COAT-H, GRP78 is under trial. So other things will be immunomodulators like nivolumab plus interferon gamma have some beneficial effect. However, the guidelines is not for or against the usage of nivolumab and interferon gamma. And the most important thing will be wean off from corticosteroid as soon as possible. So this is the thing I am speaking about. After surgery, you have to go with liposomal amphotericin B. If there is no brain involvement, you can go with lipid complex amphotericin B. If there is brain involvement, we have no other go liposomal amphotericin B at a dose of 10 mg per kg from day one. If there is solid organ transplantation also, you have to go with liposomal amphotericin B. If there is pre-existing renal compromise, we can go with isavuconazole and posaconazole. So you have to assess the response. Every week you have to take the imaging. If there is a stable or partial response, there is a good response, you can continue with the first line agent or you can change it to isavuconazole or posaconazole. If there is a progressive disease, you have to change to isavuconazole and posaconazole. If there is toxicity also, you have to change. Despite having progressive disease, after change to isavuconazole, you can add the combination of isavuconazole IV plus posaconazole oral. Posaconazole oral dose will be 200 mg 4 times a day. So that's it. Thank you.